Welcome to another edition of the It's Cavalier podcast. It's your boy Mac, and joining me tonight is one half of the Chasedown podcast. That is Carter Rodriguez. How you doing, man?
Doing good, man. A much more fun second showing for the Summer League Cavaliers as they stomped the Bucks this afternoon, which is a lot of fun.
Absolutely. See, Carter, I don't know what it is about these summer league games where people just they get so into the score, the end result. And I understand you want your teams to be competitive. And in that first game, it just felt like we got stomped out, as you said. And it took a little bit away from the getting to see Jaylen Tyson and company for the first time. But nevertheless, I've always been of the mindset, man, this is the environment that we were in. Just you got to take it with a grain of salt. But
what you do want to see, though, is like the team that's functional enough to like run some stuff so you can like see how guys are going to do running this stuff. And like in that first game, like there were a lot of possessions where it was like, this is like, I'm not learning anything from this possession. This guy isn't learning anything about himself. The coaching staff isn't learning anything about this guy. So it's like, there is like, while I am certainly not like score counting at Summer League too often, like there is probably a competitiveness tipping point. You need like a Mendoza line. You got to be on the right side of. I'm not sure the Cavs were on the right side of that for much of their game against the Magic, though. They settled in after that, absolutely brutal start. But like, obviously today, a lot of fun as they just, destroyed Milwaukee.
it felt like two completely different teams. I mean, everything was falling for them. Every single shot they took, it felt like it was going to drop for them. Going into the first Summer League game, what were your expectations, or did you really have any expectations out of Jaylen Tyson?
Tyson's an interesting kind of Summer League archetype because, like, he kind of fits the mold of a guy who shouldn't. I always say Summer League is often more disqualifying than qualifying. Like you can kind of tell, like, I remember watching Johnny Davis for Washington last year and he comes out there and you go, uh-oh, like this is not good. This does not look like it. It does not look promising. And it's not always a guarantee, it's never a perfect science, but like a guy like Tyson, who's a little bit older, who is physically developed, who has on-ball reps at the college level, you kind of hope to see him looking like one of the better guys on the floor for the Cavs and a guy who looks like he belongs. And I certainly think that's the main box I was looking for him to check. It is just that next level up in athleticism and size competitively. So I wanted to see how, he's not the fleetest of foot dude on the offensive or the defensive end, really. He really relies on his strength and his craft and his handle to generate angles. So I was kind of keeping an eye on like, what's that going to look like, against, because sometimes that's really great against college guys. And then it just gets a little too hard. And now they're as big and strong as you. And I don't know. I've been really pleased with Tyson so far in his first two games. I feel like I forgot what it's like to have a wing who really, really, really cares about rebounding.
Yes.
And I've really loved his fight on the boards. He had 5 offensive boards today. I think he had 3 or 4 yesterday and like 5 or 6 tips that just, no Cav was in the play to go collect on. I think that the finishing touch has been nice on some of those putbacks. And I do think, I think general athletic explosiveness is going to be an angst point because he's just not a freak athlete. I have liked the vertical pop when he's jumping off 2 feet. I think if he's off 1, he's going to be more of a craft guy. But luckily, I've also liked his touch. So like overall, like I wouldn't say he's flown off the page in these first 2 games, but like he certainly looks like he belongs in this setting as one of the team's better players. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, 15 combined rebounds between games 1 and 2. And that was one of the things coming out of Cal and to a latter extent Texas Tech that really stood out to me when you're watching his evaluations and scouting videos and whatnot. And at the size that he has, that is a plus because we know we have long struggled with rebounding out of the 3, if you want to say 2 for him, wherever positionally that they plan on lining him up at. But the rebounding is such a great selling point for me. The touch definitely around the basket, something we saw even today with some of the tip-ins and whatnot, and with the offensive rebounds, getting some putbacks with those. A lot of what he has shown us, I think, is translatable. Now, the one thing that I continue to be at least a little weary of is the 3-point shot, just a little bit. And he shot at a respectable level at both Texas Tech and
it doesn't look that nice. It's not the prettiest formula you've ever seen.
No. So it's not high volume right now. I believe he took maybe 5 attempts today.
Yes. He went to a 5 today.
And I think that he, over time, given the amount of shot attempts that he is likely to see with the charge or with the Cavaliers in whatever minutes that he is able to get, I think that can improve, but I'm still a little bit weary of it. And this is a player that that is actually rated very well as an off-ball shooter at Texas Tech, but due to having to do everything at Cal, I mean, it leaves you wanting to see more. Is there an area of his game that you are wary of?
Well, I want to speak to the jumper first. One thing I do like is he does go up pretty quick. It's not a guy who needs to set and consider and I do think, we saw a guy like Dylan Windler who has this picture perfect shot form that looks great coming off his hands every time.
Remind me.
That didn't shoot particularly well in the pros. So I think it's important to remind ourselves that you can't be too orthodox with how you evaluate this stuff. You can't just be like, well, I don't like how it looks, so I'm not so sure. He's been a pretty darn effective shooter off the dribble and off the catch and shoot with that form, and it's a relatively high release, and he gets it off pretty quick. So ultimately, I'm feeling okay. I'm actually not that worried about the jumper. I really am most interested in the foot speed, especially on the defensive end of the floor and unlearning some habits. And I'm talking in terms of being a guy things that would stop him from fighting for a rotation spot.
Gotcha.
This year. Because everything else is so long tail. He was, by all reports, a great on-ball defender at Texas Tech, and then at Cal, he was not a very good on-ball defender. And all the tape I watched, even the quote-unquote good defensive tape of him, a lot of it was hanging 2-3 feet off his guy and surprising them with his length to get a block or a steal.
Yeah,
it's
opportunistic stuff. And
I think he does have. He's one of these guys. I think Karras kind of fits into this, where it's not like his measurables are that great from a wingspan perspective, but something about the way his body kind of carries itself. He got that block on the jumper in the first game, and I feel like he's the kind of guy who just kind of catches people off guard, where he gets a lot of blocks where the guy goes, "Oh, wait, you're here." And it's not because he leapt so high. It's just something about the way he kind of coils his body and gets deflections. I've been very, very pleased with. But I do think at the next level, he needs to be kind of a Dylan Brooks type. He needs to be this rugged, in your chest kind of defender. And he obviously wasn't going to be able to do that at Cal with the usage rate he had. So, but it is hard to go back to that. You have to train your body to do that again. So I'm interested in that. But overall, really, I've just been looking is the athleticism going to be, devastatingly poor? Is he going to be too slow to hang? And I haven't seen any of that because of his craft, because of his length, because of his toughness.
He masks it very, very well from what we've seen against summer league caliber competition. So I'm very interested to see what that would look like in maybe a preseason environment and at the pro level and whatnot. But
what have you thought about, real quick? I wanted to ask you, what if, one thing that was kind of the book is he can play make, but he also is pretty turnover prone. What have you thought of the on-ball reps when they've had him run point?
I thought the handle left a lot to be desired at times. And I mean, we're talking about a guy, like you said, who had a sky-high usage rate last season with Cal. 3.5 assists on paper was nice for what they required of him to do. But at the NBA level, I'm not sold on him being a reliable option just yet doing that. That's at least my takeaway from it. It looked a little bit better today. It looked a little bit better today.
I think he looks like more of a play finisher right now at the next level than a play starter. I'll be interested to see when as the summer league goes on, seeing more reps where he's kind of playing as a connector. He had 4 assists to 3 turnovers in his 21 minutes, and I don't really mind the turnovers with him. I think I think he had one play where he just straight up got ripped, which that's you hate to see it. But I think for the most part, like I would rather him try these more ambitious passes, try to make reads, and learn by failure a little bit as a playmaker. But like I've been okay. I was wondering if he would be a guy who jumped off the page for me as like this guy can pass, and it's like hasn't really been that. But also I don't think it's been terrible either.
No, I think having Craig Porter Jr. next to him is really, really kind of smooth things out. It's taken a lot of pressure off of him because we know he constantly had the ball in his hands at Cal. But yeah, I was kind of hoping that he would blow me away as well, but it hasn't necessarily happened just yet. But it has only been 2 games, so there's more to come for him, I'm sure. But one of the areas that was really, really highly discussed leading into that draft, and really when he was drafted, I myself am guilty of this, is the size, right? That's the conversation that everybody was having, especially with the wing group that we have. He's listed at 6'5.5" without shoes, but we know they don't play without shoes. When he was drafted, where did you fall in line with that? Because there were a number of prospects to me that I'm like, man, this will be a perfect fit, but it just didn't end up panning out that way. So where are you at in regards to the whole size discussion when it comes to Tyson?
Well, I think he's big enough. I think 6'5.5" means you're about 6'7" on the floor.
Yeah.
That's just the reality. And his measurables, my esteemed co-host Justin Rowan has noted, are pretty much Jaylen Brown's measurables. And that guy just was he was certainly big enough to be the starting 3 on the NBA champion Boston Celtics. So like I'm not that worried about that. And like I don't know. What I'll say there is like I don't think he's undersized by any means. It's not like he's 6'4" in shoes. He plays big and strong and tough, which is really like an important factor. Like a big gripe I've had, and when I've talked about positional size, I've just been like, hey, can we stop just getting absolutely dug out by stockier, bigger, stronger dudes than us under the paint from the dunker spot? And like I don't feel like he's the kind of guy who's going to get dug out by anyone. So I really wasn't worried about the size at all. And then when you look at the other prospects on the board, like even a guy like Tristan Da Silva, who's looked really good for the Magic so far, like I just saw more glaring weaknesses in terms of self-creation, physical explosion, like all these things where I'm like, this guy just, and Da Silva's what, 2.5 years older than Tyson, and Tyson's not like a young prospect. Like every other prospect in that range, I could kind of find something I really, really didn't like about them. Like, and that didn't mean I was out on them, but I could find like one big war where I'd be like, oh man.
What were you out on Deron Holmes? I
was a big Deron Holmes fan, and
okay.
I am and he probably would have been a pick I would maybe have been more excited for. But obviously, poor guy, popped his Achilles in his first professional game. But like, the one thing that I'll remain throughout this offseason thirsty for is I really am pretty interested in the idea of a stretch 5. It's the one archetype who the Cavs have not tried in their too big era. And I've been very interested in a stretch 5 to pair with Evan because, I think that what that does is it gives you good actionable data on, is the too bigs a problem because of spacing, or is it a ball handling and self-creation problem? Gotcha. Because like I have my suspicions on that, on where those limitations lie, but like we just don't know for sure. Like if you have like a Wendell Carter Jr. level shooter at the 5, who is not like a sniper by any means, but a guy who has to be guarded, who changes the geometry of the floor a little bit and lets Evan play the 5 on, as a rim roller and a screen setter, like that gives you a different look. And I thought Deron Holmes kind of felt like a guy who maybe could be that archetype. But I didn't love him so much that I didn't really have almost anyone I loved so much that I was going to be bummed if they didn't go. I had a few that I absolutely did not want. But like, you know, I don't feel like this was a draft where I felt it was very reasonable to fall in love at 20.
I think that's reasonable. That's realistic. I was in love with the idea of Drawn Holmes, and I understand why that did not happen.
Pour one out for your boy.
I get why it happened. Felt just as disgusting as seeing EJ Liddell go down when that happened.
I forgot about that. Two very unfortunate injury timings, man.
Yes, just sucks. I think he would have fit not Liddell, but Holmes would have been an immediate contributor, I believe, for that Denver team this upcoming season. But yeah, let's get back to the Cavs here. One of the guys, and we referenced self-creation, one of the players that I was very, very curious to see just how much they had developed between the end of the G League season and now is Amani Bates. Guy who put on, what was it, 26 pounds, I believe.
Reportedly so. Yes. From the man himself.
He looks noticeably bigger to me, but I think there are definitely concerns within his game that still leave a lot of people wondering whether or not where his ceiling lies. In watching him these past 2 games, what have you seen that would give you the belief that Amani has made an improvement?
I think going from like catastrophically skinny to like normal NBA skinny, is really does matter. His frame last year was just so limited that I felt like he couldn't be on an NBA court.
Like, is it from a contact absorbing type of thing?
Yeah, it's just like you can't get you get knocked off your spots on offense, and you get knocked off any spot you were even considering being on defense. Like, I remember that game where the Heat just absolutely blew the brakes off the Cavs. It was like one of those short rest games, and the Cavs had like, I think it was the Denver like ass kicking, and they were coming off riding really high. And I remember Jaime Jaquez, who was also a rookie, did a straight line drive. Amani was squared up in position and just got knocked into the 3rd row. It was just a normal drive. It wasn't like Jaime was like, I'm going to really drop my shoulder into this guy and destroy him. It was just a very very standard NBA drive. And Amani went flying. It was like, you can't be that, your center of gravity can't be that high with that lack of sturdiness in guard at the NBA level. Like, in any game that matters, you're going to be a target. So getting to like Brandon Ingram level skinny like is meaningful, because now you can take a little bit more of those hits and absorb a little contact and let your length get you the rest of the way. I will say on the offensive end, haven't really felt any extra force out of him with that extra weight. And like, that's kind of where I think the rub with him is going to continue to lie for me, in terms of like, if you were going to say, Carter, what's the number one reason why you're not sure Amani is going to work? It's because I just think I'm not sure he's an NBA athlete. Very little vertical pop. I mean, even on a couple leak outs in transition, he had to lay him up today, where he's like, anyone who is 6'9", 6'10"
should be able to dunk that.
will dunk that, and he is laying it up because he didn't get the right, footwork on the way to the rim. I mean, and his combine measurements show that. I mean, he had, a very, very substandard vert measurement, things like that, and just not a big vertical pop guy. And I've always felt like his road is just to become an uber duber elite high volume 3-point shooter.
Yeah.
Skinny Michael Porter Jr. has been the joke we've kind of made on over on the Chasedown, and I do think that stuff could be there. So like, those are like the wide macro limitations. In terms of what I've seen so far this summer league, I've been impressed. I was really impressed today, and I tend to feel this way about Amani. When he decides to play with his head up, I don't think he's a bad playmaker. Like, he sees passes and he makes passes. And I've always said passing is a 2-skill thing that people kind of turn into 1 skill. Because like, you can see him and not be able to make them, and you can be able to make them and not see him. And like, I do feel like, he threw some like advanced read passes in this game today. And even in the first game, he had a nice alley-oop with Pete Nance that looked nice. So I think being able, if you're not going to be a plus athlete, you're not going to just turn the corner on dudes. You need to have a horrifyingly good three-point shot that guys are freaking out that you're open, so they're closing out hard on you. And then when you're in that middle space, you either got to can the midi, which I have a lot of faith in him to be able to do, or attack that destabilized defense as a passer. And I think he's shown some strides there. And yeah, he's 4 of 16 from 3. But I don't really care about that. I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure I know Amani Bates is a good 3-point shooter. So like, has he shown enough where I go, I think he's ready for a roster spot? No, I do not. I would rather him stay on a 2-way.
That was going to be my next question. How far do you think? Is he another year? Do you need to see in another step forward in terms of the facilitation or just some other skill outside of the 3-point shot?
I just think he just needs to keep getting better at basketball. You know, he's still very, very young. He's still growing into his frame. He's still learning how to be a professional. And this team is too good for him. Like, you know, like their goals are, you know, like here's like, and I'm gonna make you talk about this guy. You know, you look at a guy like Luke Travers. Yes. And Amani, most people would probably say Amani Bates has a higher ceiling than Luke Travers. But like, if you were going to roster one of the two guys next year, I'm probably picking a guy like Luke
all day, like, bro.
The things that Amani brings are, while special and interesting, are more likely not to be able to happen if I need to give him 3 spot minutes in a playoff game because someone got in foul trouble or someone turned an ankle. You know, think about the Dante Jones minutes in Game 7 of the NBA Finals. Like, you're not looking for someone who's going to dribble 10, 15 times and hit a pull-up 3 in that setting. It's so like what the team needs and what Amani's really, really good at right this second, I just don't think are super aligned. And that's why I think he's still a 2-way.
And I think that's fair for him right now. If I am looking realistically at where he could fit in on this team, there just isn't a fit just yet for him. And he's still young enough to develop. And I think I'm just trying to be patient with him. And I urge other people.
I get the sense from his some of his practice availability that he really is dreaming of not doing the 2-way thing, because that's hard on that's a hard job, man. It's hard to be on a 2-way. You're constantly bouncing back and forth, hard to get into any rhythm. You're trying to plug into 2 different teams with 2 different vibes all the time. You're like a military brat moving schools every year. But sometimes you gotta, you know, when you're where Amani is in the NBA hierarchy, you gotta just hold the L. And I think he's got at least another year of doing that before he goes, and you know, and then at that point it'll be a matter of, are the Cavs ready to accommodate Amani, and is Amani ready for the Cavs to accommodate him? You know, and then if not, might go sow his wild oats somewhere else.
Yeah, one of the guys who I have been very, very curious, and you already mentioned him, Luke Travers. There was a lot of talk.
I love him so much.
I'm very high on him too. There was a lot of talk before he joined Melbourne United about him not accepting a 2-way contract because he felt like the G League and the NBL are basically on par. Do you think that they will actually entertain, or should I say, do you think Luke will actually entertain a 2-way if that is offered to him?
I mean, I'm no reporter. I have no freaking clue if he will or won't. Do I think it would be really, really good for him to do so? Absolutely, dude. This is a team that has not minded carrying open roster spots into the year. This is a team that has, 3 former 2-way guys that have earned their way onto the main roster into full-time contracts. Can't remember if Merrill was ever on a 2-way, but he was at least with the G League team.
Yeah, I don't believe so.
So I guess maybe it's 2 and CPJ and Dean. And Lamar was too. Like, so like what I would say if I were Luke Travers representation, if the Cavs even are offering a 2-way, which we have no clue.
Right.
But if that were the case, I'd be like, hey, let's look at the data. This team constantly, every time you look at depth, every time we do there's so many guys that are going to need to play. Eventually, some two-way guy is playing because half the roster's hurt, and that's just how the NBA season works these days for every team. Like, this is a team that has consistently rewarded the guys who are on those two-way deals that have shown that they can be ready to come in and help. And boy, would I love to see Travers in a Cavs jersey this upcoming regular season, Mac. I'm just so fond of his game.
I mean, he has just he looks like a glue guy out there, right? He can rebound with the best of them at his size. As you mentioned earlier in regards to the facilitation, there are guys that can see passes and guys that can make passes. Luke can do both legitimately. He can facilitate.
At a high level. He throws some crazy stuff, dude.
We had a couple of good ones today. I mean, yeah, one to Tyson, I believe, that they hit him right on the money, right where he needed to be. He seems like he is always in a position to rebound or box out. It's just perfectly positioned stuff. He's an underrated athlete. He can do things on the defensive end.
And when you say glue guy, it's funny. A lot of glue guys are, if I may pull out an Arrested Development reference, Milford Men, neither seen nor heard. A lot of glue guys are guys that you like at the NBA role player level, like are considered guys that, like, you can park in the corner, they won't mess up.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have glue guys who are not on-ball creators, but are in constant motion, who are creating advantages, not with the threat of an elite skill, but with pure basketball understanding. And Travers, I think, is a guy that fits into that mold. He's a guy who leaks out in transition at the right time without blowing up the defense. He's the guy who cuts from the left wing as the point guard is cutting in, driving in from the right wing for a quick dump off into a layup. He's the guy who flashes up to the top of the arc, catches, and immediately makes a hit to the cutter going back door. Like, he just makes good basketball decisions. And again, it's not just mental, because he's got this big frame, so he has good angles to pass from. He can finish above the rim and with touch when he does get that angle. Because, like, how many plays in the postseason did we see a Cavs wing just get wrecked at the rim because they're just a little too small, didn't have enough pop. So even when they had a little advantage, they just had to finish at too difficult of an angle. He can find clean angles to finish at. He attacks these closeouts at a really, really high level. I don't know, man. I'm trying not to be stupid, because I get it. He's a draft and stash guy. He is a guy where, all the reporting is like, he might make it to the NBA someday. But, like, it's just one of these guys where I watch him and I go, what am I missing? Why is he not definitely an NBA player? Because even without the swing skill of shooting, you cannot tell me this guy can't be a backup 3-4 hybrid that just makes helpful plays when he's on the floor and hits enough threes to stay out there.
Well, that's the thing. I'm going to do something that I hate to do to you, and that is find me a reason why this young man could not make it to the NBA.
I don't know, man. This is where, like, it's, I know a lot of folks in our space can be kind of takesmen and really, really strong, and this is one of those spots where I'm like, what am I missing? I'd love to, like, if I could just pull like a scout and be like, why won't this happen? Because I'm not quite sure, dude. Maybe it's that the finishing just kind of, it gets a little, it gets that 15 to 20% harder once you get up to the big league, and then he's not a good finisher. He's just like a C+ finisher, and then being a C- D+ shooter is like devastating. Maybe his defense, some of these steals he's getting just turn into whiffs, and at once the level of competition goes up a notch, and instead of getting a deflection, he's getting beaten on backdoor. I didn't play, high level basketball. So, like, I'm not ruling out that I'm just wrong here. Like, I'm not so cocky that I couldn't just be wrong. But, like, when I watch a guy like that, I just see a guy who speaks my basketball language, in terms of, like, the stuff I value seems like he's pretty darn good at.
The one player that I think, in that first game left a lot to be desired to me. There was a number of second-year prospects for this Cavs team that didn't necessarily perform up to par, but in today's game, I felt like it was a turnaround, and that was Craig Porter Jr. Talk to me a little bit about what you've seen from him so far that leads you to believe that maybe he's taken a step forward.
Frankly, I'm not sure he has taken a step forward. But I also don't think that's like a disaster because I think he's a pretty helpful player as currently constituted. And in that first game, I think it is actually really important to say. In a weird way, I actually liked the first game for Craig's development as a prospect more than the second game. The second game was, Craig, we all know and love, just getting to the rim at will, drawing fouls, dishing, getting boards, all the stuff I already know he's good at. I liked in game one where, he said going into Summer League that a big thing he's trying to work on is his off the dribble 3-point shooting. So when guys go way under, he punishes it. And he took 4 off the dribble pull up threes in that first game, and he didn't make a single one of them. But like, I think when you're a player who has some job security, which Craig does, I think Summer League is exactly where you should be stretching your game out a little bit. You should be trying some stuff. Like, he doesn't have to play perfect to have a job on the Cleveland Cavaliers next year, which, he's lucky. He's got this crazy privilege compared to almost every one of his peers on that roster right now. Only Jaylen Tyson can say the same. So, I think like he should just keep trying to do that stuff because that is the swing skill for him, where it's like, because he's small, he has to be such a killer on offense that it's really, really hard to lose the minutes that you have with him. So I think that 3-point jumper form and consistency is really, really important for him. I just want to see him keep trying those kinds of shots because I'm fond of him as a player. I really, really think he's going to be, what he is right this second is super valuable, which is a guy who, if your depth takes a hit for 20 games, he will come in and he will be crazy competent for those 20 games. He will not hurt you. There will be some games where he actually really helps you. And like, what a luxury for your backup or third point guard.
That was going to be my next question here because the state of the backup guard or the next man up, it could go in a number of directions. We've Caris LeVert, Jaylen Tyson, Craig Porter Jr. There are a number of names.
Ty Jerome.
He's playing. Yes, Ty Jerome. We saw video evidence that he still exists out there the other day, and that was a guy that I was really high on at the time of signing him and watching him in the first 2 games of the season. That's all we really got. But so
here's what I'll say about Ty Jerome, because I actually have thoughts about this backup point guard battle. First off, I'll say this every time. Everyone who wants the Cavs to have a top-end backup point guard or a top-end backup center, you're fooling yourself because their starting shooting guard is their backup point guard, and their starting power forward is their backup center. And that's really important for this team's roster construction, is because you're going to have 2 small guards. It really is helpful that when you can stagger them, one of them can be your backup point guard. Same with the 2 bigs. So like, it's really going to be a perpetual challenge unless you just completely want to change the way you play entirely to have an elite backup one, a guy with pedigree that comes in. So that's caveat number 1, is that Donovan Mitchell will almost certainly remain the backup point guard next year.
Yes.
However, Kenny likes to go 10 deep, which JB never liked to do. And even when JB was going 10 deep, you could tell he was like, it was kind of a fish out of water type of thing for him, where it never felt very comfortable from a rotational perspective. Kenny likes to go a lot deeper and has said as much. So some of our perspectives might, including my own in that take I just fired off, might have to start adjusting a little bit. Now, in terms of that backup point guard spot, I think it's important to note Kenny was an assistant on that Golden State team where the Cavs signed Ty Jerome from. He has coached Ty Jerome before. And while Jerome had an absolute nightmare year with the season-ending ankle sprain, if he's healthy, I kind of expect Ty Jerome to win that job.
Okay. All right. I think that's fair. I say I was pretty high on him. I liked what I saw out of preseason last year. And in the limited time that we did get to see him, I actually posted a highlight reel of them. And I did not expect to see so many little things packed into such a small frame of time. But I think that if he's healthy, there's a legitimate case to be made that he can make an impact.
He just makes more sense with the roster too. And like when you're a bench player, fit matters a lot. Like if you're going to play Craig Porter Jr., let's say 15 minutes a game, you're playing all 15 of those minutes probably with Darius or Donovan. And now you're just small all 48 minutes of the game, because you got to imagine Darius and Donovan are going to be playing at least 20 minutes a game together. Now you're up to 35 minutes a game with 2 6'1" guards. Like, or, however tall Donovan is. I'm sure Justin is, yelling at me behind the scenes for shorting their height. But, like that, you're just really limiting your style. And like stylistic versatility is really, really important in the modern league where Ty Jerome, 6'5", it just kind of feels a little different with him out there with either of those guards. So if Ty is healthy and playing as the level of player I thought he would be, I think it's going to be a tough battle. And I kind of expect it to be a battle. Now, if you were to ask me right now, again, I do think it would be Ty that will win that job. But like, I really do think, whoever outperforms in camp is probably going to win the job.
Okay, that's fair. That is totally fair. That's one of those battles that I feel like could go down to the wire. One of the names that you just mentioned, I just want to get your thoughts on real quick before we head out of here, and that is Darius Garland, who recently appears to have squashed any and all rumors consisting of possible trades. How are you feeling about that? And did you really even buy into this clutch stuff in the first place?
I was interested by the reporting, like anytime like a real reporter reports something like that, you got to go, uh-oh, what's going on here? And then, I think it's one of those things where you just kind of, I don't know, man. As I am getting older, as I've been watching this league for a long time. On one hand, you can't just trust what everyone says because, guys lie all the time. Front offices lie all the time. So it's like you have to kind of take a look at their actions and their words and the context. And like the way I see it, guys like Darius at their curve coming off a rough year, very rarely are these guys asking out. And very rarely are the franchises that draft them and give them this first rookie max looking to trade them. There's like almost no precedent for it. So like there's not a lot of contextual evidence that suggests that he'll leave. On record, he says he doesn't want to go. And then, you look at the actions, you look at the bond the team kind of has said that they have with each other. Like, Niang all last season was like, these guys all love each other. This is such a tight locker room. And it's like, I'm not saying there can't be strife. There can't be any doubts, but like, the pieces never made that much sense to me. And, nor do I kind of felt like Darius was in a spot where he probably felt like he had much leverage, so even if he isn't like crazy sold on being here forever, it just didn't really make the timing didn't feel good for any of this, for anyone involved. So like, that's why so whether or not I'm never going to, know what's going on in what these people's brains, but like, no matter what, it does feel like everyone is acting pretty logically here. The Cavs aren't looking to sell someone at the nadir of their value. Darius Garland isn't trying to force his way out coming off, other than his rookie year, probably a career worst year. Like it just didn't make any sense. And I'm glad that in an NBA landscape that often decides not to make any sense, some sense was made. And it looks like Darius will be back.
I mean, I'm happy to hear it, man. I know a lot of people are not. They want the man moved. They've made it very, very clear. A lot of our fan base, in particular, a lot of reporting going on.
I want to go to the archetype store and buy a big wing.
Doesn't everybody? But the one question I wanted to ask you is, how does the hiring of Kenny Atkinson and the coaching staff he's brought in, he's put together a pretty pretty respectable crew here. How much do you think that will play into the backcourt tandem? Do you think it'll run a little bit more smoothly now?
Well, I felt like it ran smoothly in year one, and everyone just kind of acted like that never happened. Like,
nobody ever wants to talk about Darius Garland basically having another all-star caliber season in 2022-23.
Yeah, and like smart people are acting like that never happened. I was pretty disappointed, you know. I just feel like it was a bad vibes year. And like, you know, I think the big challenge for this front office here, and this is a roundabout way of answering your question, so please forgive me, but I feel like this front office has to figure out how much of it being a weird year was injuries, how much was it a coach who had kind of run his course with the players, and how much is it was the quality of the players, you know? And like, depending on where you fall on that, probably defines how optimistic you are about this season. If you're someone who's just like, I just think the coach lost the team, and it never felt good from the jump with the coach. If you're in that camp, then you're probably like, oh man, like we got the perfect fit. Niang is going to bounce back. Karras is going to, you know, have his best year ever. Darius and Donovan are gonna like find new love for the game of basketball and all this stuff. If you are of the opinion that the core just doesn't fit, then you're probably not feeling that optimistic about Kenny Atkinson coming in, because you're like, you can't make something work that doesn't work. And if you're somewhere in the middle, which is kind of where I am, where it's like, I'm pretty disappointed by how the depth pieces around the Cavs performed for most of the season, to be frank, and especially into the postseason, when, you know, I spent all year talking about how I felt like the Cavs finally had gotten themselves some pumpkin insurance. You know, guys, if a guy turns into a pumpkin, you can go to someone else and see what happens. And we had a lot of pumpkins in that postseason. A lot of guys who just couldn't hit the broadside of the barn. And like, you know, again, you never know if that's health. You never know if it's situation. But like, I think what'll be interesting to see is what the front office thinks, because if they run back literally the exact same roster, if they, you know, they find a way to extend or sign a new contract with Okoro, who's in restricted free agency, you know, it's pretty unprecedented to run back a whole roster unless you like won the title or were like very close to winning the title. So I feel like if they do that, it'll either mean that they just couldn't find good value because they had a bad, weird vibes year and are looking to kick some of that back up before they, you know, so they're not dealing from a position of weakness, or they just think, hey, we had a weird coaching year and we were really banged up and we still made it further than we did last year. And I'm not quite sure where I lie on it, Mac. Like, I would like a little activity, but then part of me wonders, like, do you want activity because it's fun or because you think it's better? Like, and I think those are questions we all should be asking ourselves.
And I think that's fair. And I think everybody sees the moves that, you know, some of these Eastern Conference teams, really the NBA landscape in particular, have made some of these big moves, like bringing Paul George to Philly and whatnot. And even a move like KCP to Orlando that could potentially pay off with having so many lengthy defenders. And you're like, well, what the fuck are the Cavs going to do? But I try and remind myself that, you know, a lot of things happened last year from an injury perspective. Some of that felt fluky. Some of it didn't. But at the end of the day, I truly, in my heart, and I know that you sound like you're on the fence a little bit, and that's okay.
I feel like I'm kind of a centrist here. I just don't want them to make a deal that's not helpful.
Yeah.
Like, and like, if you like, and I'm sorry, I know you were like in the middle of making a point, but it's like, do we really want to trade the 2031 first round pick for Cam Johnson or DeAndre Hunter? Guys who I'm not even 100% sure are really good. Like you only have so many bullets in the chamber, man. You can't miss.
So here's the thing. Like, before the draft, I was like, okay, I was gung-ho. Go ahead and try and get DeAndre. Go ahead and try and get Cam Johnson with the 20th pick and attach whatever you have to, whether that be Karras and some additional capital. Yeah. But after that selection has been made, I'm just like, nah, man. If that's what it's going to cost, because we clearly don't have the assets just to throw at teams the way that other teams can make competitive offers, I'd rather not. And I know that that sounds sacrilege to many Cavs fans out there that want to see a move be made for a traditional sized wing in that starting spot. But at the end of the day, I mean, there's only so much that we can offer, and you don't want to just bleed it dry.
Well, here's what I'll say, and I've said this a lot, and it's a very reductive sentence, but Kobe has to win transactions.
Mm-hmm.
He has to win. You can't just trade like for like at this stage where the Cavs are trying to get to, because they're not a title contender right now. So you have to hit a couple doubles and triples. And like Dean Wade, Karis LeVert in a pick 7 years from now, like for a role player that might be good as a fifth starter, that might be better than Max Strus as a fifth starter, like that doesn't feel like it has a high probability of a double or a triple to me. And like, you know, you got to take some big swings. So like, what I'm interested in is how aggressive are the Cavs being in looking and exploring these options? Because I don't want them to kick their feet up, to be clear. I don't want Kobe in the front office just to be like, well, you know, we had injuries and whatever, and, you know, we're pretty good, so we'll just hang. Like, I want them to be aggressive in exploring, but like, I don't want them to be so thirsty to make a move that they just do something to you know, sate us as fans that want to see some moves. Like, I want to see them win. You know, you look at the two teams that made the finals. You look at Boston, who trade basically a box of scraps for Jrue Holiday and Kristaps Porzingis. And like, how did they do that? Did they trade pick capital into forever to do it? No, they worked to build up the reputation of their role players around the league and cashed in at the right times on the right, somewhat distressed assets. Like KP coming off a weird, you know, he's been hurt all the time, came off of a weird year with a terrible Washington team. Jrue Holiday kind of feels like he's on the back arc of his career. They made the right bets. Then you look, so those are star acquisitions. Maybe those aren't the guys the Cavs are going to get, but they made the right bets. Then you look at Dallas, they do the opposite. They kind of look and they're like, we have very limited draft capital to move. Who are the right kind of role players we need that are available to us at a reasonable price where we don't really have to sacrifice the shape of our current roster that much to add? And they go get Dan Gafford and PJ Washington. Again, both kind of distressed assets. Gafford languishing away in Washington. PJ Washington was like, you know, kind of been a career loser, you know?
Yeah.
But they found a guy. They're like, we believe in him. He's worth draft capital. The little draft capital we have, we think these two guys are going to meaningfully change our roster. So let's take a swing. That's what I want the Cavs to be doing. I want them to be finding those distressed assets that when at the end of the year, we go, oh, wow, they got that guy for that. What a win. You know, Kobe needs another Jarrett Allen. Because you look at Karis LeVert, at best, I think that's an even money trade, fair value kind of deal. At best, if you don't think they lost it. You look at Max Strus, you know, fairly compensated. Like, they have helpful players they've added, but like, it's been singles, you know, and they need to hit some doubles and triples if we want to see them take that next step. And maybe that double is Jaylen Tyson. You know, we just don't know. And I'm not going to be angry at them for not trading for DeAndre Hunter at all costs.
Is there a name out there that you think is attainable? Because to me, I don't
really see the name. That's the thing, dude. Like, if you don't want to move on from 2031, I mean, the one guy who's interesting to me that like I would really think about moving 2031 for is Kuzma. Just because he kind of fits in a way that also allows you to, because like the reality is you also have to explore what a post Jarrett Allen timeline looks like. You at least have to be thinking about that if you do ever want to move Evan to the 5 full time. And what you got to do is you got to have a really good power forward there to you know, because you're not just losing your starting 5 if you move on from Jarrett, you're losing your starting 4 because he's your new starting 5.
Carter, that's the one thing that people always leave out when they're doing these hypothetical trades. Like, you are creating another problem, and people don't answer that whenever they're creating these hypothetical trades. It's crazy.
So I'm always interested if you're going, if you do want, if you're not 10,000% sure about the core four, which I'm more on the sure side than everyone else, but I'm really trying to be intellectually honest. Like, I want to at least figure out what different archetypes look like next to the Evan Mobleys of the world. So, like, a big, tough, small ball four in Kyle Kuzma makes a lot of sense. But you know, again, I haven't found a trade where I'm like, call it in, it's a winner, you know. And until I do, you know, I'm not gonna beat up the team too hard. Plus, Justin made a very, very salient point, which is the last two monster trades this team has pulled off has been the end of August and the beginning of September for Donovan and Lowry.
Still
Like,
a lot of
we
time
have
left.
so much time left in this offseason, and this is not trade season, guys.
All right. So one last question for you then. You can answer this with a yes or a no, however you feel. Doesn't have to be long. Do you think heading into the 2024-25 season, Isaac Okoro will still be donning white and gold?
Oh man. Yeah, I just think the odds play out that way. You know, he's a restricted free agent. We don't see teams make tenders for restricted free agents that are role players very often. It's just pretty rare. And like, I don't think Okoro's market will be so hot that even if a tender gets made, it will be like for FU money where the Cavs have to go like, I don't know about this one, Chief. Like, it's probably going to, you know, if someone really likes him, they'll probably offer him 13 to 16 million a year. And I think if they do that, the Cavs will likely match because it's better to match than lose an asset for nothing, lose trade flexibility for nothing. And they're not going to be a tax team anyway. Or not, or certainly not a first apron team anyway. So you look at that, you look at how hard it is to pull off sign and trades with like a third of the league going like, no more transactions, aprons are scary. So like, I think with that, it just feels like all the mechanics that would have him playing somewhere else to start the season, it just feels like a pretty narrow window to hit. Whereas like, you know, just looking at the odds, it feels like a 90-10 kind of thing where it's like he's probably going to be here next year. Whether now, if he signs the qualifying offer, probably means his time in the white and gold is limited long term because very rarely do guys sign the QO and then stay forever. Though we just saw Miles Bridge do it in Charlotte. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I would be sad to see him go, but I also understand if the team's starting to look in other directions.
That's precisely where I am with it. Like after watching him, because I would do legitimately believe that he has made strides in certain areas, but just not enough. And he's not doing the things that we need him to do when we need him to do them. So it just sucks. Like
I would like to see him with the new coaching staff. That is my I would be sad to not get to see that.
Same. I do believe in a Kenny Atkinson motion-based offense that there's a lot there that I think that Isaac can be tapped into in regards to his game. But I just want to thank you for coming on, man. Such short notice.
Absolutely, brother. Appreciate you.
Go Cavs.
Go Cavs.